It's time now for business news. Devon Murugan. It looks like South Africans are getting more and more unemployed.
Yes, indeed. Those numbers are increasing, and it seems persistently so. I mean, each time, every quarter, the numbers come out. COVID was a factor, but more and more people are entering the ranks of the unemployed. And it's now at a record high official number, 34.4%. We haven't seen this type of figure since the labour force survey was out in 2008. So I want to bring in economist at Stanlib. He's the chief economist, Kevin Lings. Kevin, hopefully you can hear me. Again, the fundamental problem which this country suffers from chronically is that more people are entering the labour force looking for work, but the economy cannot keep up providing jobs.
Devon, that's exactly right. We have more or less 600,000 people that enter the labour market every year, and that's got a lot to do with, obviously, the growth in the population. And so in order to stop the unemployment rate rising, you've effectively got to add 600,000 jobs a year. And obviously, we're not doing that. We've actually continued to lose jobs. And as a consequence, our unemployment rate will keep rising. And I must say, it's going to keep rising every year till we can add 600,000 jobs new, at a time. And we seem to be a long way away from that.
Kevin, what I find staggering is that if you just look at the second quarter, from April to June this year, you compare it to last year, the numbers here are quite shocking. 54,000 people falling out of employment, 584,000 just between April and June. Understandably, it's comparative, but they're now entering the ranks of the unemployed. A third of the country's young people, and as you say in your note, simply cannot find work. Fundamentally, what are we getting wrong?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're just not encouraging new investment, right? So if you want to create jobs, how do you fundamentally create jobs? You've got to build new businesses, new factories. You can't expect that government's going to create the jobs. There just frankly isn't the money to do that, and also not the requirement to have that bigger government beyond what we've already got. So what you need is much more private sector investment. And that investment has to be across the board. It has to be in every single sector. It has to be in small business, startup business, medium business. It has to be in technology. There are whole areas that we're simply not investing in, and we haven't been investing for some time. We've equally got this difficulty with our infrastructure. The electricity is the obvious one, and we're trying to do something about that now. But without appropriate infrastructure, again, we're going to struggle to get that investment. So to me, the main thing we're doing wrong is we're not encouraging private sector investment enough. There is an element of encouraging it, but we've got to do way more. It's an absolute disaster as far as I'm concerned.
But Kevin, I mean, having said that, in your note this morning, you said hoping for an increase in private sector employment. It's not a growth strategy, right? And you can't rely on the public sector, as you say, to add jobs because, in your words, it's a recipe for bankruptcy. So, is it an issue of, and if you look at the young people, for example, a third not employed, is it an issue of the education system not being aligned to labour absorption, or are there just too few businesses out there to absorb them?
There's both of those factors. I would say the education system plays a big role here. I think we're trying to produce too many academic type qualifications and not enough technical skills. And there's no doubt that South Africa is short of technical skills, and linking the training directly to an industry so that that person can then more easily be absorbed into the labour market. We're not doing nearly enough of that. So I would say that our education system undoubtedly letting us down. Coupled with that is the number of people that drop out of school, right? So if you drop out of school, you haven't finished matric. What are the chances of you getting a decent job? It's minimal. So we've got to look at the education system. And then, quite frankly, there are not enough businesses. There are not enough startup business, medium-sized businesses. And I guess we blame a whole lot of things, but I'm not convinced that that's fair. I think we're not creating the environment in which business can flourish. So we are, at the moment, government is trying to effect various reforms. You can see that with the ports at Transnet. You can see that with the Eskom and allowing private sector more into Eskom. But we've got to do much more of that type of reform, and we've got to draw the private sector into the economy. If that means partnering between government and the private sector, that's good. We've got to get the private sector more involved.
Just before I let you go, Kevin, I mean, in the midst of all of this, we have a debate on whether or not we should implement and get this basic income grant started. Now, the new Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, while not shunning the idea of a basic income grant, he did mention the fact that if you create the tendency, the behavioral tendency towards dependency, you will have a problem. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if you look at that staggering youth number, we're sort of heading in that direction persistently if we do not get that bracket in jobs. And the two issues are interlinked, are they not?
100% interlinked. So you can make an argument, a moral argument, a social argument that South Africa has to provide an income support. Absolutely. And I think many people would agree with that. But at the same time, the Minister of Finance, I think, is making it clear that there isn't just the money available to afford these types of programs. And so we can't simply sit back and say, oh, well, the answer is a social grant. The answer is making sure that more people have jobs so that we have less people turning to the state in order to get some sort of social payment. Otherwise, the number will just keep going up, right? 600,000 people. 600,000 people a year into the labor market. If those people can't find jobs, that's 600,000 people that will be looking for a social payment every single year. Therefore, the number will just escalate and ultimately bankrupt the government. So it's not a solution. There's a role for income grants, but ultimately there's no shortcut to creating new businesses, to creating private sector employment, and therefore making sure that less people turn to the state, particularly our young people.
Kevin Lings, the chief economist at Stanlib, thanks very much indeed for those insights.